It was on December 6, 2015, the day after that show with Maluma, that I decided to expose the horrible episode of violence I had gone through. I still remember that day. My stomach was twisting. My hands were sweating. My heart was beating at 10,000 per hour. I spent long minutes staring at the publish button until I closed my eyes and pressed the key. And boom, I filled myself with courage. It was on December 6, 2015, the day after that show with Maluma, that I decided to expose the horrible episode of violence I had gone through. I was so afraid. All I could think about were the consequences of raising my voice and making my case public. I knew that my life could be even more in danger. But you know what? Still, scared to death, I grabbed my fear with one hand, and with the other I held on to my dignity and my desire to be an inspiration to others. I made up my mind and I exposed the episode of violence I had lived through. If I didn't speak up, all his lies will become a false reality, as was already happening. Narcissistic psychopaths often completely transform the reality behind their abuses, especially to protect their image in society. And to do so, they spread rumors and invent fantasy stories in which they proclaim themselves as the victim. I remember that day I spent hours writing those lines. My hands were shaking. My eyes were a sea of tears. At that time, I realized that my soul had also been abused. I had completely overlooked all the abuse he caused me during his stalking, his harassment, his tortures, and his persecution. I had to be careful with what I said, with everything I expressed, because anything I said could be used against me during the case. Still, I pressed the key. With my complaint on the internet, I started to receive hundreds of DMs. The rage of some for what had happened began to unleash support and empathy from others, and there was never a shortage of misogynistic comments from those in favor of violence. They said, "What could she have done to get beaten like that?" My phone kept ringing, and more than 1,000 comments on the post made me shudder. Other victims felt identified and filled with courage to denounce. Others took strength to leave their abusive relationships. This was soothing to my soul. It was then that my story on the internet went viral. Although I didn't name my aggressor for legal purposes, it was a matter of minutes before the name of the person responsible came to light. And I was just thinking, this guy is going to kill me. He is going to kill me. He will find me. And I was in crisis. And the scandal became bigger because many knew he worked for Ricky Martin, and his Instagram spoke for itself. The comments were thousands and thousands. From "Ricky, you're dancing here a Venezuelan woman," to "Ricky's dancer is an abuser." And it was a scandal that made the press, with a sensationalist tone, involve the names of the artists we worked for. Sure, it makes sense. When you work with an artist, a singer, It is like when you work with a brand. Somehow or another, your talent and your image are part of the brand. And you have to commit to ethical and moral behaviors. Definitely in the case of this dancer, ethical and moral behaviors were not his style at all. Dr. Ramani exposes how narcissistic psychopaths are mostly found in positions of power, such as in big companies, political positions, in the entertainment industry, in sports. In some way or another, they are idealized. They use their opportunities and their contacts at their convenience to entrap, torture, defame, denigrate, and attack their victims. I can see this clearly in my story. When I met him and he offered me a job, his constant sugarcoating was not only that he worked with Ricky Martin, but he also claimed that they were very close. After I made my denouncement public, to my surprise, more women contacted me claiming to have been abused by him as well. And not only were they physically, emotionally, and psychologically abused, but also a dancer claimed to have been sexually abused by him when she arrived in Miami. In the testimonies of these girls, I could see with a brutal clarity how he used the same strategies, preying on newly arrived immigrants in Miami, offering them jobs and opportunities, even at some point molesting them. They regretted not having denounced him to the courts, and one of them even told her bosses and employers about these crimes. Some ignored her complaints, and others didn't believe her at all. I also found out that I was not the first one to report him to the police. It turns out that there was already a previous case of domestic violence against him. Cristina Romero was the first woman to place a restraining order against him because he apparently also hit her. I also learned that she, his ex, Stephanie Pagan, had been abused. Hours after I posted, she got up the courage and also posted on her social media that she had suffered threats, physical and psychological abuse. And for me, it was a great shock to see everything that was happening. She, who at some point, let's say, hated me because unfortunately she had some emotional dependency because of that horrible relationship. In that day, she joined the same fight. That day, she broke free. Also, some dancers alleged that he would hire them and touch them inappropriately, even if his girlfriend was in the same place, just as he did to me. At the time, I had no idea that I was being sexually harassed by him. It is a pattern of behavior, a predator, and the artists were and are his cover letter to trick and gain credibility with his prey. That is why in his social media, the constant bragging and boast of naming them and the photos next to the artists are gasoline for his ego and honey for new victims. Many times we are so afraid to denounce what is not right, what is not fair, especially to report that abusive boss, that colleague, or that abusive partner. We are afraid to speak out about the situations we go through because sometimes we feel very vulnerable and powerless in front of people who have power and influence in society. And reporting them could mean paying a very high price. But believe me, it is worth it. If not, how do we put an end to it? How we make this world a better place? In that moment, the press started looking for me. They wanted to know more details about the incident, and they also wanted me to bring a message to the women who are going through this problem, gender violence. At times, I hesitated to give interviews, but then I understood that from my silence, I couldn't be part of the solution. From my silence, my message wouldn't reach more women. And the Me Too movement was not yet popular. I realized I had a purpose: to tell what many of us decided to keep silent, to speak for them and for me. So I took the courage and accepted invitations from the press and the various television channels. I wanted to speak up. It was ironic. Before, I used to attend TV shows to entertain by dancing or acting. This time the mission was different: to motivate more women to get out of toxic relationships, to get out of abuse, to denounce. And I also wanted to protect my life, because if something happened to me, the world would know, and he would be the first suspect. Several weeks passed. The legal battle was approaching. I was very anxious. I was still afraid that something could happen to me. On the one hand, I felt very confident and firm about my decision, but on the other hand, I felt doubts and uncertainty about the consequences of my desire for justice. Honestly, I only let myself be guided by my intuition and my heart, because reason and fear only told me to back down. And I was alone in another country, spending every penny I had, while very powerful lawyers, choreographers, and public relations people supported and defended this predator and his false role of victim. At that time, I asked myself a lot, why? Why did so many people in the entertainment industry decide to support this criminal? Even with proof and evidence, most decided to turn a blind eye. And that was a great disappointment to me. It was a great disappointment that broke my heart into 1,000 pieces. And the nightmare was just beginning. After the legal battles began, he had been captured by the police, and the case was being a scandal in the press. Curiously, a new lawyer appeared to represent him. His name, Jose Baez. He is one of the lawyers who represented Harvey Weinstein, known for being one of the most powerful executive producers in Hollywood, accused of sexual harassment and rape. His crimes and his victims were the reason why the Me Too movement went viral worldwide. Today, Harvey Weinstein is behind bars. Jose Baez is known for representing high-profile defendants, including NFL players and millionaires accused of murder and various crimes. He is the attorney behind the famous and controversial case of Casey Anthony, a woman accused of murdering her baby. And despite all the evidence and inconsistencies in her testimony, this attorney managed to get her innocence. The public was outraged with this case. This case has been one of the most famous in the United States and Florida. The strange thing is that not everyone can pay the fees of this lawyer. In 2019, Harvey Weinstein hired Jose Baez, whose fees exposed through various press portals were from $1 to $2 million. This led me to understand that this lawyer doesn't represent just anyone, or at least not everyone has the thousands or millions of dollars that his services would cost. And I must be honest, we dancers don't make those sums of money. No. I wondered who was funding this lawyer. Possibly someone with a lot of money or a lot of influence. But who would be so interested in helping a predator so that his crime would go unpunished? Who knows? The truth is that these were questions that went over and over in my head again and again. And it was at that moment that the war began. Now the battle was between David and Goliath. If you have gone through unfair, toxic, and abusive circumstances, I would like to help you recognize, validate, and release those experiences and emotions. Let's take steps full of self-love, courage, and vulnerability because you deserve it. Go to the link in the description, maggalife.com/liberation, and get your masterclass and workbook. It's free. With love, Magdiel.